Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John again with Coffee and the Bull. I want to start off with thanking our 29 subscribers on YouTube. As of 30 seconds ago, our 202 followers on Facebook. And our 11 followers on Spotify. Again, we couldn't do it without you guys. Really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, head over to the YouTube channel or Spotify if that's your thing. We will have a TikTok coming eventually, as well as trying to get onto Apple Podcast. Haven't gotten that far yet. We're still learning as we go. As you saw, the coffee debacle has posted today.
My bad, guys.
It was in the coming, in the making. It was coming up. I wasn't trying to process it. Before we get into today's episode, which is gonna be episode 5, it's gonna be titled "Losing at Life." We kind of just want to touch on a few things. But while Mike tries to keep his lungs in, just kind of want to touch on some things. I think they're called trigger warnings or something along those lines. So before we get into it, we are planning to discuss complications with having children.
Honestly, just some very sensitive topics.
Right.
That if you are not really in the headspace to listen to some people's struggles, then maybe this is not the best time to be watching it.
And a big thing that we want to put out there is in all of our episodes, past, current, and to come, everything that we're given is number one, it's what we call uneducated. We didn't go to college for this. We're not scientists. We're not doctors or anything like that. And it's all from a male perspective, from not just male to generalize, but from our own specific perspectives, as it's going to be things that we've experienced and we've gone through. So please don't think, number one, that it's professional advice or professional guidance or anything of that regard. And the goal is not for us to give you our sad, soppy stories, but to tell you kind of what we dealt with, how we dealt with it, and that in the end, the end result is we're still here, we're still pushing on, we're still trying to succeed in multiple aspects of our life. Maybe not, Bill Gates status, but we're trying to get through this life.
And I think one of the things, before we get into too much, it's, life sucks. It's one of the things where it's really hard. It'll chew you up and spit you out if you give it the opportunity to, and unfortunately, what you run into is bad things are going to happen. There's things that, not everything is going to work out to the way that you want it to be. You're going to have, family members are going to die. People are going to get into car wrecks. You're going to have moments where you look and you're like, I don't know what to do. You have moments where you're going to cry. We can't, obviously, there's nothing we can say, nothing that we can do that's going to stop that. We deal with it every day, at work, where, where people are at their lowest end. In our profession, you deal with it where, you deal with the dead bodies. You deal with, the people who are just struggling with addiction, where, they've turned their whole life upside down for, the next high or something like that. So it's that type of stuff is going to happen. Our goal is to help you in the middle of it. Not saying we have the answers, but like John said, these are things we've lived in or lived through. It's one of the things where we don't have all the answers, but this is just our story. And that's, again, back to the driving force of the podcast, is honestly just telling your story, because I remember how I was in a lot of mine, where I felt utterly alone, and that's where a lot of guys are. I talked to one of my friends, and he said, one of the worst things that or worst time periods of his life was that he felt like he deserved what was coming his way. The moments where he had weakness and just felt alone. He was struggling with different things. He's like, I guess this is just what's meant for me, and that's a lie that gets taught. And that's, there are positive outcomes to some situations, and
100%.
Some of it is just, finding the spot to look and see where that positivity takes place at.
So one of the things that I took from my grandfather was because not everybody's grandpa's the same. I get that. But like my grandpa, Vietnam vet, very hardened man. But by the time he became my grandpa, he was a different man. You know, that
Right.
wasn't the body stacking guy from Vietnam anymore. And he used to tell me, and I use the saying today, um, I'm not a good person. I'm just trying to be better than the person I used to be.
Hmm.
And I think most of us get to that point in life where you realize, hey, in my 20s and 30s, early 30s, late 20s, and so on, back to your younger days, you were still learning life. So
Right.
some of the things that you did that make you not a good person or made you not a good person in those moments, there's still time to correct that and change your behaviors to become a better person. And that's kind of the motive and drive that we're trying to get out there is we're not the solution. Sometimes we might be the band-aid to the problem. Sometimes the guidance that we've got might be a temporary solution, and sometimes it might be a permanent solution.
Right.
So moving on to our main objective and what we want to talk about, just wanted to preface that and let you guys know that we're just average dudes. We're not doctors. We're not scientists. We're not therapists. We're nothing like that. We're just eyes, ears, and flesh and blood like everybody else. And our goal is to help. That's why we've taken the career paths that we've taken. That's why we've gone down the roads that we've gone, and kind of why we were exposed to the things we've been exposed to in our
Right.
life
Right.
to bring us to this point that maybe not so much clarity, but we have an understanding to help everybody else when they get into those dark spots. So no matter what you're going through now, remember there will be a time that you can look back and say, oh shit, I made it through
Right.
that. So that being said, we're going to get into our topic of the day, which is losing at life. And so I want to kind of touch base on our first topic, which is going to be miscarriages, and how that affects or how that affected me. So not so much miscarriages specifically, but loss.
Right.
Especially as we're all fathers or we're all uncles and grandpas and stuff like that. My ex-wife ended up having 2 miscarriages throughout our marriage, and the problem that I ran into during those miscarriages is I had no clue what I was supposed to do. It's been proven that men and women bond with the children differently and at different times as you progress. From everything I read today, most women start their bonding process while the baby's growing inside of them. Right. Whereas men, we're more physically tuned into things. And so for us, we've got to have that baby physically in our hands. And I can say between my youngest son and daughter, I remember our bonding moment with my son. Like it is the best bonding moment. I love all my children. Don't think daddy's throwing shade at you. But the greatest bonding moment I have is with my youngest son. I talked to that belly every day. I laid my head on it. I made sure that she could put her belly on my back while we were sleeping, and that little dirtbag would kick all day. But when he was born, he's crying. He's on the table, and they're poking his foot. And I walked over, and I was like, hey, man. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, he stopped. He turned his whole head. He's staring at me. And he didn't care what those nurses were doing. He was focused. And that was our bonding moment. But his younger sister, I didn't bond with her until she was at least 3-4 months old. It wasn't the same because men, we bond differently. So
that's kind of how it was when my son was born. I was expecting this big magical moment right at delivery. The moment I see him, and don't get me wrong, I was excited. Super stoked, and we'll get into that later. But it wasn't. Like I talked to my wife, I'm like, obviously I'm taking care of this child, but there wasn't that big massive dump of
raw emotion.
I guess raw emotion, but maybe just that undying love right off the bat. I would have done anything for that kid, but obviously, about 6 weeks in was when it was like, okay, no, I want to come home to this kid. I want to see, what's he doing, taking pictures of him, every facial expression.
Right. So for me, obviously the birth and everything else is awesome, but with my ex-wife, her first miscarriage, I basically had to try to hold her hand over the phone. We weren't in the same state when it happened. And then the second miscarriage, we were in New York. I was stationed at Fort Drum, and she had twins. One of them had gotten caught in the fallopian tube, so they had to give her a shot that caused her body to reject it and flush everything out. And she was just a mess. Like it was for her. She was not only had to stop breastfeeding our son because you can't do that with that chemical in your body, but she also at the same time is losing two babies. And the detriment of it was she was told she would never have kids. That was like a big thing for us. Was she was told, hey, you've something's wrong with the inside of your body. I'm trying not to get into the specifics, but they told her at a young age, you'll never have children. Mm-hmm. And so first I had to come to terms with that. Like, hey, I'm going to marry this woman. I'm never going to have children, and I'm okay with that. Like, I love her. That's just where I'm at. And then have the first miscarriage, and then have my son, and then now a second miscarriage. As she's struggling with losing the bonding of breastfeeding with our son and losing these two children inside of her womb, I'm literally sitting on the side of a bed as she bawls her eyes out, feeling like, what was that movie with Will Ferrell in the NASCAR? And he's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. That's
with Ricky Bobby.
Ricky Bobby. That's how I felt. Because I'm like, should I hold you? Should I go make you some coffee? You want some tea? Like, I didn't know what to do. And I could.
Olive Garden.
Right. Like, and I could feel the contention building up in her because she's like, I'm dying over here.
And you're perfectly fine.
Right. And you all you can talk about is going back to work and doing things around the house and staying busy and everything else. And it's because it wasn't so much that I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't feel at the time like I had anything to deal with because I had no bond to it. I had no. And that's not trying to sound macho. It's not trying to be negative. It's not trying to be ugly. It's just that.
Do you think that your mindset has changed after years down the road looking back?
I'd love to say yes on so many other things in life. I can say yeah, no, my mindset's changed, and my viewpoint's changed. I still don't feel anything towards it, and it gets me to a point where it's like, should I feel lost? Should I feel?
So there's a little bit of confusion.
Right, because it's like losing something I never had. It's like so mad that another guy wrecked a Ferrari. You know what I mean? I never owned a Ferrari. I've got no investment in it, and it's because it was never a reality for me. I didn't feel it growing. I didn't feel all.
It's because you weren't present during the pregnancy process.
No, I was there for the whole thing.
You wasn't deployed or anything.
No, I was at home. It wasn't. Number one, it was very early on in the pregnancy, so we're talking. I think she might have been a month, maybe 2 months.
I got you.
But it just wasn't. It wasn't that I didn't want the children. I didn't have that connection,
that bond to them yet.
Right, and that's where, in this instance, the goal or what I hope the viewers take out of this is, as a man, it's number one, you're not alone. I felt dark, to be honest. I really felt like something was wrong with me, that I should feel pain or mourning or loss, and I didn't. And it doesn't affect me now because obviously I've got children, and I feel like I've succeeded as a dad in a lot of areas and failed in a lot of areas, as most dads do. But I don't have any negative effects on it. I have no idea how she is on it. I don't know if it still weighs on her or anything like that. We don't have those types of conversations. But if you're a dad going through this right now, don't feel like there's something wrong with you. Obviously, if you think you should talk to somebody, go talk to somebody. But it's not abnormal. Because that was one of the things the doctor had pulled me aside and said, hey, you may never feel anything about this, but you need to be there for her.
Right.
And I hate that saying. Because of this incident, I hate the saying, make sure you're there for her. Make sure you're there for them.
What does that mean?
You're right. Like, how do I support that? You know what I mean? Like, I'll tell you right now, the worst suggestion is, well, let's try again. Don't say that at all. That will get a lot of things thrown at you. The best thing I could do, or the best advice I can give anybody going through that, is when she's upset, or just throughout the duration of it, okay, understand that things aren't normal for her. Her body's going through some stuff, her emotions are going through some stuff, and her mind is going through some stuff. So in those circumstances, try to be overly loving, but listen to what she's got to say. If she's telling you, get away from me, give her some space. Come back and try again later, but don't completely withdraw from it and put, as much as I hate this, because we just talked about this, you feel like you got to put your emotions on the shelf, and unfortunately for her, lashing out in anger's the emotion you got to put on the shelf.
Right.
Don't be angry at her because there's nothing she could have done.
Right.
And ladies, I'm not telling you what to do. That's not my job. Understand that he may not feel anything, and that's not because he's a shitty person. It's not because he doesn't care. It's not because he doesn't love you. He just doesn't have that bond yet. It's kind of like an unfair judgment.
The bond with the baby. Let's
right,
clarify that.
Right.
He
still
loves
bonded
you,
with you,
but
but
see what he got, man. Get your feet off the table.
If you'd have got a text, it would have scared me. Like, bet your feet are on the table.
So I kind of had a different approach, to life. When we originally started talking about this topic, it was, at losing that life. It was more along the lines of, when life's not going your way.
Right.
But honestly, that's a little bit boring of a title. But I grew up in the South. My entire life has been in the South, and one of the, I guess, cultural expectations that you have down here is, you get out of high school, get out of college, whatever, you get married, and then you have kids.
Right.
And you don't waste time doing it. It's not uncommon for, a girl to get out of high school at age 18. By 19, she's married. 20, she's got a kid on her hip.
Right.
And what that does is it puts that expectation that, hey, you have kids young, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what me and my wife ran into is we got married young. We were both 21 years old when we got married. We'd been dating since high school, and our parents fell into the same thing. It's, hey, when y'all having kids? Well, we literally just left. Like, we're leaving on the honeymoon now. You can give us a minute.
Right. Right.
And so we ran into that issue where, as every family get together and stuff, hey, when y'all having kids and everything, it's like, okay, and initially it was, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't that we weren't trying, we were doing what we could, it's putting the work in, as they say.
Right.
But it was every family get together. That's a conversation, as everybody's checking in on how lives going and everything, and they'd ask my wife, hey, when y'all having kids? And she's like, and she would tell them, oh, we're going to wait till we get out of college or whatever. But honestly, we were trying to have kids from the get-go. And what we ran into was, we noticed as the years went on, it was, okay, are we, obviously there's an issue somewhere,
right,
because the child isn't coming, and things like that. And so it started to drive a wedge between us, because you don't want to play a blame game, and anybody who's going through this, there's a cluster of emotions constantly. Like, it's a delicate dance that you got to do, and and as you try to navigate that, you realize that, hey, you're not a dancer, and so you get, she would get these little inklings that she might be pregnant or whatever, and you get excited, so she goes to the store, gets 5 or 6 pregnancy kits or whatever, all the different brands, because this one might be wrong, but
right,
so you're just hoping for one of them to be right, and it never happened for us, and so we wound up, it was right at 7 years in, or maybe even before that, maybe around year 6 or so, we had watched other families, it got to the point, like, so we're sitting there struggling to have kids. And you mask your emotions and your sadness at family, Christmas dinners and stuff like that. You don't want to be the Debbie Downer. And then I've got a brother, him and his wife. It's like every time he looks at her, she spits out a tricycle motor.
Jesus.
It's just and we're like, come on, man. And I wish the best for him, and I love my nieces and I love my nephews to death, but man, it got to the point where everybody knew, hey, we were trying, it just wasn't happening. And so what that transitioned into is as my other brothers started having kids, they get pregnant, you could feel the tension when they went to tell us, hey, we got a kid on the way, because they're excited, and you want to be excited for them, but then it's a reminder, hey, you don't have one,
Right.
and we had reached a spot where it was like, hey, look, I was a cop. She was a biologist at the time, but she was working for the state. She wasn't making that much money. I was a cop, so I wasn't making any money, and so we knew that in vitro was out. I had several friends who had gone through the adoption process, where to get a newborn baby, and they had paid. It happened multiple times for this one couple where they had paid for all of the like the food and doctor's visits and everything for this lady to go to the doctor during her pregnancy, and it was with the agreement that when she gives birth they would take the child. Well, there's a clause in there that gives her so many days
After
the baby's born she can recant the deal. And it happened to him, I know of twice. I want to say a third time. And I was just like, I don't have the money in my bank account to feed myself, much less somebody else.
Right.
On the off chance that this doesn't work, and that's just going to be even more devastating than even trying to go that route, if it was to be turned down. And so we were looking, it didn't have money for in vitro, didn't have money for adoption, and didn't want to be or what weren't prepared, because they don't want you to be a foster parent if you don't have parental experience.
Right.
It's kind of like adopting a dog and you never had a dog.
Yeah.
And I'm not before y'all send me some hate. I'm not saying kids are the same as dogs.
To a degree.
Dogs are worse.
I am.
If your kid bites somebody, you don't have to put them down. So
that's fair. That's fair.
And kids don't get fleas as quick as dogs. They're a little bit more resilient. But it's one of the things.
The bath easier.
Right. So, we were struggling with that, and it's like, okay, we had reached the point where we had just given up.
Right.
And that's a rough spot to be in. I think we were 28 or so, 30, right around that range, and you just like, hey, I guess kids aren't in the works for us.
Right.
As much as we wanted them. Like I love kids. I love my kids to death now. At the time, I loved all kids. They couldn't possibly be bad.
I don't believe you.
So, we took and she came to me one day, and it was a very rough conversation, because when we got married, we did traditional vows, and it was till death do us part, and I think with the exception of maybe one or two instances, that's our goal. Like it may be the romantic the Notebook type ending,
Right.
or it might be one of us going to prison, but we meant that till death do us part thing.
Side note, I got kicked out of the movie theater
for watching that movie.
Yeah, I
so
laughed.
we took and she took and she come up to me one day, and she got tears in her eyes, and she had actually brought up the idea of us getting a divorce, because you try not to play the blame game, but it was she felt that she was the reason that I wasn't going to have any kids, and she didn't want that for me, so she was willing to divorce me for me to go find somebody else, and and go try to have kids that way. And that's a rough conversation to have.
That is.
It's one that
love in it, though.
Right, and it really does. Like it's I guess that's meant for maybe the books or romantic novels or something like that. But I told her, I said, no, that's not. I agreed to be your husband. You agreed to be my wife. We've been in, at the time we'd been married. I want to say 7 years, and wasn't going to leave her or anything like that. It might have been 8 or 9 years, honestly, that we had been married. But I told her, I said, look, we got 2 dogs. If we're going to be dog parents, we'll be dog parents together. But regardless of what we're going to do, we're going to do it together.
I can just imagine you saying my fur babies.
We actually did a couple times. I'm not going to give you that satisfaction right now, but we'd kind of reset agreement with each other. But it's still, every time you get the phone call, about, hey, so and so's having a baby or whatever, you're excited for them, but there would be a session where you're just down, man.
Right.
And I remember, and I'll never forgive my wife for this.
Is this the coffee cup?
No, not yet.
Oh, God, I love the coffee cup story.
I took, and before work one day, I went to my mom's house and have a cup of coffee with her. If y'all haven't noticed, there's a theme in my life. And I sat down with sat down with a cup of coffee with her, and she was just sitting there, being a mom. That's all it was. She didn't mean any ill will by it, and she's like, hey, when are you and Brittany actually going to have a kid? And when I tell you, I cursed my mom out. If you could believe that, I promise you I did. And I said, and I wasn't, it wasn't, F you and all this other stuff, but it was, what do you think we've been doing? We've been trying to have kids. Obviously, if we could have kids, we would have gone through there. And I'm being a lot more gentle right now, but there was a lot of anger that was present. And my mom sat there, and she took every bit of it on the chin, because, and so, like I told her, I said, hey, we've been trying to have kids. Obviously, we're something's wrong. I don't make the money to fix it, but y'all keep bringing up every single time we get together. That's why we don't ever want to come over here anymore, because that's all we ever have to listen to, and it was a very, very rough conversation. And I remember that's a cardinal sin in the South. You do not curse your mama.
No.
And I smooth, I dropped them, and we hadn't talked about it. I'm sure, I'm sure there's no doubt in my mind I hurt her feelings. There's no doubt in my mind that, if I could take it back, I would. Because I want to say I was going into work that night, and I think I worked 7 days in a row that day, or that week. And so I come in after the end of that, and go to bed. I get in at like 5 o'clock, 6 in the morning, right in there. And I remember Brittany had taken, and she had woke me up, and like nudging me on the shoulder. Hey, are you gonna sleep all day? I was like, what are you talking about? Like I'm still, my brain is just tired right now.
Those of you that don't know, and waking Mike up before Mike is supposed to or has to wake up is probably one of the scariest things you could ever do, unless you're his child.
So she takes and she elbows me, and I was like, what? She's like, you gonna sleep all day? I'm like, I'm not sleeping all day. Like my brain's telling me I hadn't been asleep that long. And so I look, I'd been asleep for like an hour and a half.
Oh.
And so I was like, leave me alone. Like that was just my thing. Leave me alone.
Right.
So I go back to sleep, and she comes back in there. I think it was like an hour and a half later, and she jumps on the bed, and she goes, hey, it's time to get up. It's like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I'm like, is it really? And she goes, yeah. But the way that she said it, I knew she was lying.
Right.
Like the inflection that she put in it, I knew she was lying. And so because I don't trust my wife at that moment in time, I turn and grab my phone. I see that it's like 10 o'clock. I got in at 6. So it's like, I tell her, I said, get out of the room and do not come back. And so she gets out, she leaves. And I knew when she shut the door, we're going to fight about this later.
Right.
And so I was like, I might as well suck it up, go ahead and just be miserable all day, or I'm going to be miserable all week when we start arguing about it, And so all right, so get up. So I go walk into the living room, and I sit down. I'm staring at the TV. The TV's playing something. I don't even know what it was, because I'm not focusing on it. I honestly just want to go to sleep, but this stupid woman won't leave me alone.
Right.
And she's sitting on the couch, all happy and giddy or whatever. And I remember she handed me a coffee cup. Her brother was actually expecting his first child, and I think she was due. My niece was going to be born in, I think, 6 months or something like that. And she hands me this coffee cup, and it said, Daddy, established, whatever year. And I was like, what is this? And she goes, I made it for Jordan. What do you think? And I was like, well, the lettering on it is kind of crooked. So if you want, before you hand it to him, fix it. And so I give her the coffee cup back. And I was like, oh, there's also a chip on it, a little crack on it. And I was like, so I'd redo it, but get a different coffee cup. And I hand it back to her. And she looks at it, and she goes, and I'll give it to her. She didn't expect it. So she's playing an audible now. It's like she's trying to recover what she can. And she goes, all right, well, I guess if I can't give it to him, I can give it to you. So I grab it from her, and I immediately set it on the side table. I was like, what do I want with a broke coffee cup? And I remember I'm looking at the TV, and you feel it building up right next to me. You feel this I don't want to say tension because that's not even the word for it. Like if you could imagine a monster being summoned out of the ground, like that's it's like Beetlejuice coming up, you know, and
and so it goes planned.
So she's like, "Will you just look at the damn cup?" So I look at it. I was like, "It's a coffee cup," and then you know I'm not the smartest person, but then it registered, "Hey, no, there's something going on." I was like, "You're pregnant?" And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "Who told you you're pregnant?" And she's like, "I took a pregnancy test." She took like 7 pregnancy tests, and my dumb ass, Smooth, put all of them out on the coffee table and inspected every one of them to make sure they all said yes. You know, and so it was one of the things
it's not
where
the coffee table you have now, is it?
do what?
It's not the coffee
It
table.
might be. Who knows?
No.
But it's one of the things where, for so long, we had been losing. You know,
Right.
that battle, and the mental despair that hits you. You know, when you start talking about, hey, I'll leave my wife. I'll leave, you know, this or that, or you give up the expectations that you had growing up of having kids and going to little league baseball games, you know, and all this other stuff. When you start having to give that up or give those ideas up because of the struggle that you've got, it really puts you in a dark spot.
Yeah.
You know, and I hate being that guy, but there's so many times it's like if you've never been through it, you don't really know. You know, and that's where, you know, you feel absolutely utterly alone because guys don't talk about it. The wives will talk about it, but the last thing you want is you go into work and your coworker's like, "Hey man, you got a minute?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure, bro. What's up?" And he's like, you know, starts talking about you can't have a kid. I'm like, who cares? You know,
right.
He got child support. You know, and we
right.
make dumb comments like that. But that dude's struggling. Like that dude's probably at the darkest point he will be in his life. You know, not being able to have that kid, because for him to be able to carry that to work and say, hey, you know, this is obviously something going on. Like you don't, you know, very few people don't ever want to have a kid. You know, and so that was one of our things. It was like, man, like life's got to be better than this. Like I don't, you know, I don't want to just, you know, me and my wife, you know, exit this earth and there's nothing left behind, or, you know, what are we working for our entire life? And so it brought up like, you know, not existential type questions, but it brought up things where it's like, okay, what is all this worth? What's it matter? You know,
Right.
And so it's just one of the things where, you know, you start looking at, you know, you feel like you're losing, and there's really no other way around it.
Right.
But it took just taking them, you know, there's nothing that we did. We didn't do anything different before than we did before, you know, afterwards. And I would say that there's, hey, if you just hang in there, it may not, you know, and that's kind of the theme of today's thing is, you know, you could hang in there, you can keep trudging on. I'm not saying it's going to get better, you know, if you know, especially with the pregnancy thing and the miscarriage things. You know, when people start having complications, those complications don't just go away. Sometimes you get some grace, you know, that God drops down some grace and says, hey, look, you know, I've got you on this one, and you get the, you know, the joy aspect of it and stuff like that. You know, like I've got a son now. You know, she hasn't been on birth control in 15 years almost. And we've only got one, you know, and I'm not saying
that one belongs to you.
Right,
And that is your kid.
It's one of the things where, you know, you have to prepare that, hey, it may not get better, and that's not really, you know, that's not the school of thought that you see in the world right now.
Because
you know,
they want to give you that
just
false
suck
hope.
it up, you know. If you can't have a kid with her, go have a kid with somebody else. You know, get your bloodline going. You know, and all this other weird shit that they got going on right now. But it's one of the things where, but that's kind of that was where my struggle was. You know, and I didn't talk to anybody about it. You know, and because of me not talking to anybody about it, that's when I blew up on my mama. You know, and so it's one of the things where I've got to stress that, hey, you got to have that friend.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to have the person, you know, somebody that you can unload on, where they know where you're at, they know when to check in on you. You know,
right. Well, and in that, it's we stress the have that friend, but there's another caveat to that, to where there are certain things that you'll go through in life that, you know, for our example here, you know, there's things that like I never had the struggle of not being able to have kids because, as you can tell from my child support amount every month, I don't have a problem having kids. But in that same breath, like I would say that I'm probably not the person that you want to come talk to about that problem. Not because I wouldn't be compassionate or understanding or anything like that, but how do I help you in that circumstance where outside
Hang
of
in there,
just being-
champ.
Right.
You know, a little fist bump to the
right.
shoulder.
Bring a cup
you don't
next
know.
time. I'll send you home with a package. You know what I mean? Like how do I help in that aspect? Where in the same regard, not to get too crazy off topic, but we had a coworker during a really bad storm. He had found out that his significant other was cheating on him with somebody he worked with, one of his coworkers, and I know this was unplanned for us to talk about. Not that we plan our conversations, but I didn't bring this up because it just clicked in my brain. Me and this guy were not BFFs. We're not, text buddies. We're not calling, playing video games. We're not that guy. This dude calls me at 5 in the morning to be like, "Hey, I'm sorry for waking you up.
Right.
I'm
This
getting ready
is what
to
I've
do
got going on."
Right. I know you just went through this, and I'm sitting here ready to do something really stupid. I need your help."
Right.
And it was in that moment, and that's, I'm being very, very limited on the details because I'm not putting anybody else's business out there. But it's things like that where you have to know your coworkers enough to know, who you can call, not necessarily coworkers, but just circle of people, to know who you can lean on, who you can vent to. Because
it's like having tools in a shed. You've got to grab the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And so, it's just like going back onto our topic here. Showing up to work thinking you're doing a bang up job, and you're rough around the edges, but in circumstance, you're the guy that they're like, no, he's going to get it done. You're not going to like the way he does it, but he's going to knock it out. Like I showed up to work. It's 4:00 in the morning, and I get told by my boss, "Hey, take it back to the house. We don't need you here anymore." And in that moment for me, that was a kick in the nuts. You're literally caught off guard, which is why I don't agree with putting in a 2 weeks notice, because your job ain't giving you 2 weeks notice when they're about to fire your ass. So it kicked me in the nuts because it was a couple of days before Thanksgiving. It was right before Christmas, obviously because timeline. But what got me through it was because realizing, okay, I've got to still buy things for Thanksgiving with no paycheck coming in. I've got to buy Christmas presents. I don't have a job lined up right off the bat because who's hiring around Christmas time?
During the holidays, nobody does anything.
Right, exactly. And what got me through it was, number one, the good circle of friends that I do have. It's a tight circle. I will tell you right now, my buddy Cody, and I didn't really tell anybody this, and I didn't want to throw it out there, but I had probably a week's worth of money left over outside of the primary bills I had to pay my mortgage, pay my utilities, and put food on the table. And I was stretching thin. And Cody, his wife, and his mom, I never said a word. I vented to Cody because, he'd been in similar boats decades ago, that I was struggling. I didn't know what I was going to do. And before I could finish my struggle, Cody and his mom had both sent me money on Venmo and said, "Hey, go buy your kids food. Like we'll get you through Thanksgiving." And Christmas time rolled around, and it was the same thing. And I paid him back. Like I'm talking, he sent me money, and I got paid on the first, and I paid that before I paid anybody else because I was like, no, I don't want that debt.
That tension in the relationship.
Right. I don't ever want them to think, well, all you ever do is call me when you need money or whatever, know. And so, again, I've never told anybody this. It was really not something that he wants, recognition for. But that's the type of friends that you've got to have in your life. Is that when you hit that bottom, that friend's like, "Hey, I got you. Like, don't worry about me. I'm good. I'm working. I've got it covered." And I know you and I have had this conversation plenty of times about, if I'm eating and I ask you to eat, I don't care if you have money. Like I'm asking if you're hungry. Like, let's go get something to eat. Or let's go get fast food because we don't want Brittany to know that you're eating fast food at work.
You walk into work and they say, "Hey, we don't need you anymore." go into that mindset a little bit if you don't mind. You know, for
No, not at
the
all,
ride
not at all.
home, because that's going to be something where I'm going to bring something up in a minute that I kind of went through that'll kind of tie into it.
Right. So to not go into too far into the specifics of it, because it's a spot of turmoil, if you will. You know, you show up at work. It's 4 a.m. The boss comes up. He's a good friend of mine. He comes up and just basically says, you know, from the top, I got to send you home. And because at the time I was in a company vehicle. Another coworker gave me a ride home because they were getting off work, and so they gave me a ride home. And it was a long ride. It's about a 40 minute drive from there to my house. And
It was like an hour or 2 hours when
Right,
when you're in your brain.
right, like you're not driving because you can't drive because they're also in a company vehicle. And it was a long drive where, God bless her, she was trying to keep me upbeat about the situation and say, hey, you're not fired, you know, you're just home while they look into some things. And in the back of your mind, and this is the downfall of having the brain for police work. Back of your mind, you're like, I'm not stupid. Like this is
Right.
this goes one way, and there's no other way to look at it. This goes one way. And unfortunately, being foolish, I believed it would go my way, knowing it wouldn't, and hung out for it instead of doing what I should have done. But you get to the house, and now, you know, because when I'm at work, I don't have my kids, so I'm sitting in the house by myself, you know, and it's like
Right.
you couldn't be any more alone in that moment. And the people that do know what's going on, either A, they can't talk to you about it, or B, like you, for example, you were like, well, that's bullshit. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that to just you and not everybody else? And I was really glad you were there, because it was a like, I know you had intentions of, or we had talked about, you know, you finding a different job also, but there was I say proud, and that may not be the right word, but when we found out what they were doing to me, and you were like, okay, you gonna do my boy like that? No problem. I'm gonna hang my hat up too, and I'm gonna go down the road as well. And so it was, for me, in the back of my head, I was like, that's the loyalty of a friend that I want in my life. You know, that's a guy that I'm gonna break my back and die trying, you know, to be that guy's right hand for the rest of his life, unless you're, you know, doing something you shouldn't be doing. Yeah, I didn't want to go in depth on that one.
I had I had an instant where back in like 2015, I think it was. I was tied up. I was working from home for a company at the time. It was pre-law enforcement, and I was doing property inspection reports for people, for insurance companies. As boring as that sounds, it's even more boring if I explain it. And but it was a decent little gig. You know, like I would you know, play video games throughout the day, log on a computer for a little bit, go back to video games or whatever. Like it was definitely a young guy's dream job. You know, if I didn't want to wear pants that day, I didn't have to wear pants. Nobody ever saw me. And I remember my brother. I've got a twin brother, and he was in the hospital for a motorcycle accident that he had. He was hospitalized for several days, and while he was there, my mother-in-law also got put in a hospital for some health issues, and surprisingly, they were, I think, 2 doors down from each other, same floor, everything, just 2 doors. So you go visit one, walk next door to the other one, and
The convenience.
right, and so my wife was in town from work. She had a weird schedule at the time, but she was in town, and I was working from home. So it's like, hey, we tell my sister-in-law, hey, we'll stay with him, you know, while he sleeps and gets better. Told my father-in-law, hey, we'll stay with her, you know, and so we're kind of tag team and staying in the hospital room with him. And I took a moment. I was going to go home and for a couple hours and do some work. That way I don't get too far behind, because hey, we still, you know, it was a great job, but it didn't pay a massive amount of money.
Right.
So I still, you know, had bills and stuff coming up. And I remember I logged on to my computer, and the queue that I would pull up to see what work I had set up had nothing in the queue. I'm like, that's odd. Maybe, they're doing site maintenance or something like that, and so I give it a couple hours and log back in. There's still nothing there. So I send a couple emails. Nobody responds. And so it wound up being the next day. I take and pull it up again. No work in the queue. So now it's like, hey, I'm hitting people up on the phone, and I finally got one of the lower level managers on the phone, and she goes, no, we sold the company. We don't need you anymore. And I'm like, what do you, like, you couldn't send an email? You couldn't send something to say, hey, congratulations, jerk, you don't have a job, And I remember being so mad. In the middle of that, I had jury duty too, and so I had to drive. It was the hospital was a long. I think it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where I had jury duty at. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. And so the whole time I'm trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do? My wife is in the hospital room. She's actually sleeping for a moment while her mom sleeps, and I remember I went in the hotel room, saw that she was sleeping. I was like, I'm not going to wake her up with this news yet, because it's it's, hey, who's going to put food on the table? Who's paying the car note? Who's paying the electric bill? You got all these things going on, and how long is it going to take to get a job? This wasn't during COVID where or pre-COVID where they were just handing jobs out to anybody with a heartbeat. Like, no, you went through massive it was where entry-level jobs wanted 10 years of experience. And you're like, I don't know what I'm about to do. On top of that, I didn't have a whole lot of job experience, to say, hey, he's a shoo-in to walk in, and so I remember just being so concerned with what, where we were going to go from here, and so I walked into my, I didn't wake her up. I walked next, a couple rooms down, go in there, and my brother's awake, and so one of the things he had experienced a traumatic brain injury prior to his motorcycle wreck. So it kept hitting like a reset button. And I'm not making fun of him, but it was, you'd have a conversation with him, 30 minutes later you're having the same conversation with him. It was just on a loop. His brain wasn't retaining anything for short term at the time. And I walked in, and me and him had always, we're twins, so we have a very, very strong dynamic. Like, we know when something's bothering us, or bothering the other one. And so when I walk in, he immediately, and he's like, hey, what's wrong? And I said, nothing. He goes, no, what's legit? I've got nothing to do but listen to you. He said, so let me know what's going on. And so I tell him I'd lost my job, and he had taken and he's like, well, look, he'd offered me some advice, had some different little odd jobs come up, and but he's like, look, he said, I'll reach out to some people. Don't worry about it. We'll get you a job. Well, later, Brittany wakes up, and she comes in there with us, and without missing a beat, I think I was on the phone with somebody, and she walks in, and he goes, hey, I talked to Mike. I'm gonna get him squared away. You only got to worry about the job. And she's like, what are you talking about? And
so he's got twin telepathy.
Yeah, he's got,
but he ain't got twin intuition.
Yeah, he ain't got none of that.
Right,
And
right.
The one time in the entire hospital experience he had where he wasn't on a repeat cycle was that time. I'm like, of course, man. Like, I didn't get to set the stage for the conversation.
Right.
I didn't get to do any of that.
No,
I just get to suck it up and hit it head on. And I remember, hey, I don't have a job anymore. And look, she had all the questions you'd expect, all the emotions that you'd expect.
Right.
But she was not angry at me, and that made a big deal for me. But what that did, she told me this. She said, look, finish feeling sorry for yourself today. Like, take today. I get you. You're stressed out. I get it.
Right.
She's like, spend the rest of the day, feel sorry for yourself, but tomorrow you're finding something. She said, I don't care if it's, at the time Craigslist was big. She said, go on Craigslist, find something there. She said, I don't care, but you're not sitting around the house feeling sorry for yourself. So I said, okay. So I hopped on Facebook, and I found a job. It was picking up, there's no other term, I'm not going to glorify it, picking up dog shit out of somebody's yard.
Yep.
These people wanted to pay somebody to come to their house, I think it was like $100, to pick up dog shit out of their yard. I'm like, you know what? Prior to this, I would have said I'm not doing it.
Right.
But when you don't have a job and you've got to make some money, I'm not against doing what I need to make money. And so I was like, all right. So I messaged the guy. He agrees. We set it up. And I was going the next day to do this little dog cleanup job. And somehow she didn't have work. And so I was like, okay. And I didn't ask her to. I didn't say, hey, this is what I got going on. You want to come give me a hand? And try to pawn off on her. She didn't say nothing. When I got up in the morning, she got ready. She hopped in the truck and rode with me to go pick up dog shit. And she does things differently than I do. Like I get, hey, I'll do things real broadly. Hey, you want me to clean up dog shit out of this yard? I'll go through and I'm going to hit about 60, 70% of it. But I'm not, you're also paying me to pick up dog crap. It's $100. You're going to get $100. No. This girl picked up 5 garbage bags full of crap. And I'm like, I don't know where you find all that. Like at one point she's, hands and knees, with these gloves picking up this stuff and throwing it in there, wound up weeding their garden, like all kinds of weird stuff, and just trying to make the backyard look better. And I'm like, that's not what we're getting paid for. And
right.
But, I don't know if you've ever been humbled like this. You can't talk crap to your wife when you don't have a job. She's got a job and she's picking up dog shit for you.
Right.
You do what she tells you to do because you're going to be a happily married man by the end of it. And I remember we finished up and knocked on the door, told the guy we were done. He comes outside and he's in awe of how clean his yard looks because I don't think he ever cleaned up anything dog poop related out of his yard. And he wound up paying us an extra $100. So she somehow turned $100 into a $200 job, and we look back on that as hands down one of our darker moments in marriage, but also one of the stronger moments.
Right, the bond builder.
Because it was at that moment I realized that she was in it for us. It wasn't just hey, I've got a job, he needs to pull his weight. It's 50-50 and all this other bull crap that you see out there. She was going to give everything she had to this. She knew I was in a dark spot, and she dedicated herself to me. And there was another job we had picking up fence boards, and she worked that girl till she couldn't close her hands up. Because it just wore out. And she will give everything she's got to our marriage. And looking back at that time, that's where I saw her true character in our marriage. What she was willing to go through, no matter how nasty it was, how much it sucked, how much fear. I know the fear that I had. She had the same fear because she's the one that pays our bills. I don't do it. I don't know what's in our bank account. I don't know who I owe what to, when it's due, or any of that other stuff. She handles all that, And so, like, I'm just looking at it from the micro or the macro standpoint. She's looking at it as micro. Hey, we got to have X number of dollars for this week, or we're not making that payment. And once you get down that road where you start missing payments, it doesn't get any better on its own.
No.
And so that was one of the things that I struggled with for that period of time, because it was like, hey, this is not. I was I had a college degree, I'd had a great job, and all of a sudden within a week I'm picking up dog shit in somebody's yard and praying for another job like that,
Right.
And it's like that's how fast life can turn around on you. But changing my perspective on that is what helped me out in that regard. Now, like we talked about previously with the pregnancy, you can change your perspective on that all you want. If it happens, it happens. If it don't, it don't. There's nothing you can do about it. But with this other area, it was, if I want to be like, man, screw these people and all this other stuff and focus on that so long, I'm going to remain in a negative category, and I'm going to miss the blessing that's in front of me. Where, hey, you've got this woman who is going to do what a lot of women wouldn't do. I've seen a lot of guys that have gone through that, and they're alone even inside their relationships. So I was very lucky to have somebody like her come up alongside me, because at the time I didn't have a bunch of guy friends.
Right.
I didn't have the circle. Actually, none of the people in my circle now was in my circle at that time.
Right.
And so she was legit the only person I had, obviously other than my family. But she was the only person I had that I could be vulnerable with and have a moment saying, hey, I need some help. So I, as much as she aggravates me, I got to give that girl kudos. She did a great job on that.
No, yeah. I actually used the dog shit analogy in my dating life.
Just because I'm curious, I don't know how many times we can say the word dog shit before we get banned, but go ahead. I'd like to find out what you're talking about.
So I legitimately So I say envy, because it's really the only proper way to show your marriage respect from my perspective. Um, that damn coffee pot every time. It's always
One day
something
we'll
with
get a
that
new
thing.
one.
Right, one day. Not today, but one day. Um, like I know, like every relationship, your marriage has highs and lows, right?
Right.
And to a degree, I know them better than some other people. Obviously, not intimately because I don't live with you. Um, but the difference in the conversations that we have about your highs and lows is to every high, or I'm sorry, to every low that you have, there's always a stronger high story.
Right.
And from the day to day, little things that get under your skin to the dog shit story, it's not a common conversation that I have with other married men. Usually, when they talk about their spouse or their significant other, it's usually the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually what she did today to piss me off, what she did to this or that.
What's
or
she
this.
nagging about? And,
Right. And when I talk to or meet women or whatever, because I'm a single guy, and obviously I don't want to be forever alone or whatever. I ask them straight up. I'm like, so I got a dog, and I've got to pick up his dog shit. You gonna come help me out? And depending on that answer, I'm like, I'm not gonna invest in this. Like, if you're not willing to be a partner with me, then I'm not interested. Now, granted, that's not the first
I
question.
was
Where
gonna say,
it's
that's probably not first date material.
no.
That might be why
date.
you're single. I'm not an expert. But.
Maybe into first date. But if I'm like, I'm not like, hey, how's it going? I'm John. You want to go pick up some dog shit? I feel like that's not the greatest pickup line. But it's to me it's a symbol. It's a staple in the level that she's willing to go to support you at your highs and lows, to your humbleness to say, not knowing necessarily how her reaction's going to be, to say, I'm letting you know now, I feel zero, worthless, like I'm nothing right now.
Right.
But I'm gonna go do what I gotta do. But this is on the table, just so you know where we're at, and her to be like, all right, well, we're gonna milk this today, but you're gonna put your big boy pants on,
Right.
and be that supportive wife.
Well, I think that's a change of pace from what you see a lot of times.
Right.
Because what you run into, and this is, being able to sit back and watch coworkers who have gone through nasty divorces.
Oh yeah.
And watching friends who their whole life changes upside down all the way to just the one extreme to another, whether it be something small or even something super dark. Guys are expected to shelve your emotions.
Yes.
And that's with the miscarriages. I haven't my wife didn't have a miscarriage. She just didn't get pregnant. But you see it a lot where they're like, hey, how's she doing, or whatever. And with the pregnancy, it was hey, how's she doing? Well, I don't remember anybody asking me when she was pregnant, hey, what fears are you having?
Right.
Because it was a nightmare for me almost every week of, am I going to get a phone call of her having a miscarriage, because she had trouble getting pregnant. So the statistics of having an issue throughout the pregnancy is outrageously higher. And so there was that, and with the job, it's you run into the issue of, okay, well, what's he doing? Well, not how's he doing?
Right.
They don't realize that, in your case, you're going home, you're a single dad, you're not getting any help from your ex-wife, and you got two kids who still need Santa Claus to show up. They still, there's an expectation there, and you don't want to crush their dreams. So you got to do everything you can from that standpoint of not bringing that drama home.
Right. Well, that on top of that, you've got to bring the same energy that you did last year when there was a job and there was no financial problems. And anybody that knows me knows that especially when it comes to Christmas and my kids and everything else, like, I go all the way out. Like, I'm talking, I've got fake snow. I've got, we leave snacks out for reindeer.
Mm-hmm.
I do everything. Do you remember the year before when I got them those chocolate milk balls that go into there? I accidentally got the mocha latte, whatever it was. Oh, that was so terrible. But there's that aspect of it where you go all out because you try, and I know we've talked about it, to keep that little bit of imagination and that little bit of pretend, with Santa and with the Easter Bunny and all that. You try to keep the child in them alive for so long before that crappy neighbor kid or the kid at school or somebody ruins it
for you. If you're telling your kids that they're not real, I hope you have a flat tire on your way to work tomorrow.
I do, and I hope
because
your kid
I cannot stand when people are like, I had somebody go up to my 6-year-old son, well, Saint Nick ain't real, right? Or Santa Claus isn't real. I wasn't going to say the name, but I'm like, no, that's what they do anyway. My kid's not watching YouTube,
right?
So it's you hear him say that, and you're like, I want to strangle the life out of this little kid for telling my kid that. Like who tells their who tells their kid, no, that's real. Don't worry about it. Like why do you have to squash the joy?
Right. And that's so, not to get into the, because Mike and I are not the type of people to tell somebody not like how to parent. That's not who we are, unless you're doing a shitty job. And by that I don't mean the Karen version of you're doing such a bad job that we're just judging you. We're specifically talking about people that abuse their children, but we take into account of the fact that you're going to take that away from your child. Well, now your child's going to take that away from somebody else's child.
Right.
And that's where the downfall comes in, because my 8-year-old, he is at that point in life where he's teetering on the edge. He's smart enough to figure it out. Like he'll pick stuff up, and like the fake snow last year, he was like, "Well, Dad, I put water on this and it didn't melt." And I was like, "It was magic snow, bro."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Yeah, no, I would have believed that, except this isn't cold at all." And I'm like, "Listen here, Detective Dan. Take your ass back over here and let's go worry about Christmas presents." He's like, "All right, Dad, but we're gonna get back to the snow here in a little bit." So I'm out there with a vacuum trying to get it up before he catches on to it. But it's that to me is a part of the magic process. They start out young, you get that fantasy going, and you get their imagination going, that creativity. And then as they grow older, you have that where they try to sneak in and look at what the presents are, and figuring out that some things are real and some things aren't real. And it's all a part of how you develop your child, so that when they get older, they get that same euphoria and nostalgia when they have kids, and they pass that on. And
so you got to find a way to do that when you're in the middle of being terrified.
Right. And you're trying to keep their dream alive without giving them the shittiest Christmas ever, because it's the last thing that you ever want as a parent, is to walk out when your kids are expecting Santa to deliver and you're just not there. You're just like, well, I tried. I had enough to get us dinner tonight.
Right.
And that's where we're at. And it's one of the reasons that the one of the agencies we worked at that has a really big Christmas drive. That's one thing I'll never take away from that place is I supported that 110%.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed getting a box because I filled the back of my unit with toys, wrapped them up, and I delivered those in some of the lower projected areas of our area that we worked, because to me that was a staple for those kids of, no matter how bad life is, whether they understood it or realized it or not, there's still a promise out there, you know, and now when you're at home and you're trying to still deliver that same joy, and you're wondering, like, number one, you don't want to ask anybody for help, especially around the holidays. You don't want to be like, hey,
everybody's tight already,
right? Because they're trying to do the same thing you are. You don't want to be like, hey, I'm broke and I can't give my kids Christmas dinner. And one of the things that I was actually thankful for was Thanksgiving that year, because you were like, hey, why don't we do Thanksgiving at my house? And to me, that I had the turkey, I didn't have everything else, and so for me, whether you knew it or not, I was like, thank God, because kids were eating turkey.
Not good turkey.
Right. The legs were good.
Mine came out good.
Your mother-in-law loved my legs.
So, let's but when we go before we go to wrap this up, let's if you can look at giving a message to the people who, because honestly, since we've gone live, I think we've got as many females watching as males.
We do.
Which is surprising for me because we're kind of blatant right off the bat. Hey, this is for guys,
right?
And by all means, females can listen to it. I've got no issue with that. Just understand, we're not coming from your perspective. We're coming from our perspective. But so for the people out there now who are losing at life, is there anything specific that you'd recommend for them, for whether it be to help out when times are going to suck and there's nothing they can do about it? Even all the way down to something where, hey, it could get better. You just got to change your mindset. Is there something you'd recommend with your experience for them?
So I will say this. I'm a man that gets through things in different ways every time. There are circumstances that you're going to run into, and as much as we hate it now, sometimes the answer is you just got to bear with it. You got to keep pushing, but you're really just sucking it up to dig.
I thought it was go find you a mic, but evidently that's not the answer.
Hadn't gotten there.
I think the correct answer, everybody, is take, and regardless of what the issue is, when you thought you had a great friend in the chair next to you, take and try to you've got that person. Again, we're going to beat this topic till y'all are going. You're like, we're going to unsubscribe now.
Sometimes your friends suck.
Yeah, sometimes they do. I had literally softballed you a question. But,
I was building up. I was building a good answer,
so,
and a foundation, and you just.
I know that
you split and mauled me.
When you get those times where, hey, no matter what you do, you've got zero control over it. It's the. I have found, as cheesy as it is, the finding somebody that you can confide in who is going to help you out, mentally. They're not, for example, when my wife couldn't get pregnant, there was nobody on this earth except the deity who was going to be like, hey, I got you. Everybody else is going to be like, I say that. When you look at the scientific side of things, maybe another guy could have helped out. I don't know. But, it's one of the things where there's nothing we could have done to change that, but having somebody, I did have a friend. His name was Jimmy. Him and his wife had an issue having kids, and they're the ones that went through the adoption process. And I wasn't talking to Jimmy at this time, but I remember having those conversations, for being that person for him when he was going through it. And so it's almost like God gave me the opportunity to say, hey, you remember all that, that line of bull crap that you was feeding him? Congratulations, you get to eat some of it. And so that kind of replayed in my mind where, sometimes you get that friend who tells you, hey, I don't have an answer. and that's, they're there. We were there for them when they got bad news that, hey, the person was backing out of the adoption deal, and that crushed him and his wife. And we got to stand there and say, hey, look, can't help you out. You want to go get some queso from the Mexican place,
right?
And something as simple as that. And it's like you've kind of hammered in several times. It's the power of being present,
right?
Somebody who's there and actively listening to you and knows that you're hurting.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of things because, like we talked about, guys have to shelve their emotions. They're expected to grieve almost invisibly.
Right.
And that person who's, hey, I know you're hurting. I got you. I don't know how I'm going to get you, but just understand I'm here with you because I see you hurting. That I'm hurting also.
Right.
I think that goes a long way.
And that
rather than I just handle everything differently.
Well, I mean, every situation dictates how you're supposed to handle it.
It could have been. I don't get through life without you, Mike. That's all you needed to say.
I was getting there. I was building up to that.
Because
because you weren't there in my 20s. You were over there like, I'm going to college. Your mom went to college, not your actual mom, because she's a saint. But it's a matter of the perspective that you have, and I'm not giving you the bullshit motivational like keep your head up and you'll be okay. I'm not doing that. You've got to look at what you're going through and make yourself a plan.
And who's going through it with you.
Right. And make yourself that plan on how you're going to get through it. And sometimes you're going to be in situations that control you, and it's uncontrollable. And sometimes you're going to be in the situation where you're like, okay, right now, on the outside looking in, I'm losing this battle. But I know in the long run, I've got this under control, and I'm letting it happen the way it's happening so that I can gain control. But as guys, for us, it's not as easy always to be like, hey, buddy, this is what I'm dealing with, and can I cry? Where sometimes it's just, right now, we're just sitting in chairs, next to each other. We're not talking about anything that's currently weighing us down, but we're talking about things that at one point were the weight of the world crushing us.
Right.
And getting that discussed and out of the way is freeing up a lot of space and a lot of baggage in our mind and in our emotions for anything to come. And then, of course, sometimes you got to find yourself a John who doesn't talk shit to you when you don't say their name. But having somebody with stupid pinky, having a friend who, like this, knows your quirks and knows what gets you, upset, upset in a good way, not, pokes the right buttons to let you know, like, hey, the shit sandwich you have to eat is bad, but cut that bitch in half and let me get the other half.
Right.
Let me eat some of that with you as best I can. Sometimes it's a crust, sometimes it's half the sandwich. Also, if Mike's mom is watching, I think you're a saint.
So we're gonna go ahead and end it right there, guys. I appreciate y'all listening to us. Y'all have been great so far. The last couple of days we've been watching Facebook, we've been watching Spotify and YouTube. Honestly, like hawks. We're every single time we get a new follower or a new like or something like that. Or a couple people have shared it. It's honestly been exciting for us. It's had outrageously more positive movement than what we anticipated, just being two jackasses in a spare bedroom.
That was one of my favorite things about, and not to, I know we're trying to end it and move on. This was one of my favorite things about telling people that we were doing this, and we always led it with, we're going to start a podcast. And most of our friends, if not all of them, were like,
oh, God.
What are you jackasses about to do? And then when we explained it, the outpour of support then it's unprecedented to what it's become now with as many people have come out and liked our Facebook or hopped onto the YouTube channel and subscribed or onto the Spotify and subscribed. And so I know we thanked you guys in the beginning. Just want to thank you guys again. Like I said,
but don't take the thank too serious, because we still need comments. And we still, because we want to hear from you. Let us, if it's something simple, let us know where you're at. Hey, I'm in New York or wherever. That way we know where this is reaching to. And the other part, send us an email. As of, I think, year to date, we've had 0 emails from y'all.
Zero emails.
We can't do letters from y'all if y'all don't send us letters. But honestly, guys, let us know how we're doing. If you haven't done it yet, hit that like, subscribe, share, follow button. And help us
email coffee&thebull@yahoo.com.
Right. Help us get this out there, because again, it may not be for you, like we talked about. Not every episode is for everybody, but the podcast can be for everybody. So take bounce it off to your friends, make them listen, and hover over them like a helicopter, and make sure they hit that subscribe button, guys. So for now, unless you got something else, we're going to say toodaloo.
Stupid.